subscribe, don't be shy. Welcome to Thailand.com.ai, AI exploring how tech and daily life tie with Dave on this adventurous quest. Welcome to Thailand.com.ai, bringing you the best. Welcome to Thailand.com.ai, where innovation meets the sky. Dave's your guide in this tech-savvy ride. Thailand.com.ai, let's see what we can apply.
Saudi Cup, g'day and welcome back to the channel. Hope everyone is well. It's been a little while since I've produced a video, but this week we are looking at a couple of things. We'll catch up with some news on AI. There's actually been a very big dearth of AI news in Thailand. Actually, not much happening at all. Been very quiet over the last week or so. But there's lots of interesting AI stuff happening. Backdating a little bit, obviously the Apple launch was very big, where they basically are introducing voice and video are two very big cutting edge ways that AI will progress quite quickly. So today I'd like to talk about a couple of those. Now, rather than me just regurgitating what other people that know what they're talking about, a bit like the good old university days where you needed to make references to your sources, now you can actually use video. I think it's great. If someone's actually talking about something they know about, you're trying to present an argument. I'm actually not trying to present an argument. I'm just basically trying to present what AI is doing, in my opinion. I can see where things are actually going, and it's backed up by my argument of other people, I think. So, yeah, it's a bit like the modern day university scholar can reference video. Video is certainly going to be huge, and it is interesting, some of the things that people are saying today. So anyway, I'll put them on and we'll have a look. But there's a couple of key points when it comes to large language models. And we now know that NVIDIA, for example, are tussling to be, the most valuable company, the second most valuable, the third most valuable. But either way, the power of compute, the power of chips, the power of CPUs, GPUs to run these large language models, the transform platforms that they use, they are basically got to the point where they know that scaling will produce more and more data. But the science now is actually looking at the training of the large language model, of basically as much data that they can get, becomes the general training. And then we drill down to more specific training, like more purpose-built training for agents. Or we might have an LLM that's a specialist in medical, an LLM that's a specialist in mechanics on Mercedes-Benz models, number E17 to E18, whatever. So we'll drill down and we'll make sure the accuracy of these models is right. So that's the big question at the moment: trust and security and accuracy. Now, the best way probably to explain this, we know that AI has got huge benefits, but also huge downfalls. So if we take deepfake porn, all the horrible stuff that people are actually using AI for, scams, impersonating people, the clones impersonating people, voice impersonation, that's all bad. But I think it will be outweighed with the good. So for example, particularly education and medical, you can have a doctor in your pocket that is trained on millions and millions of images of skin cancer. If you happen to be in the middle of darkest Africa and you see your growth on your arm, rather than having to get on a plane, get on a canoe and get back home, you can actually take a photo and the AI can actually do something immediately. Same with education. If you're in a country where you haven't got access to education, AI will be a huge benefit to you. So I think on the two polarized arguments, the benefits will outweigh the bad side. There's always bad things to every new technology. Again, we keep going on about nuclear and how planes don't drop out of the sky and all that sort of stuff. So when these things are regulated, the truth lies somewhere in between, right? So going on to that, the big push over the last probably month that I've noticed is companies coming out saying that we need to be trusted. Oracle, for example, coming out and saying we need to be trusted. Cisco, big announcement with Cisco. They're positioning themselves to use the AI, but there's an interesting article we'll look at now. So let's have a look at an interview with Mustafa Suleyman, who is basically now the head of AI for Microsoft, and just let him have a little bit of a talk here.
Do you think definitely you see these orchestrators making good API calls at the right time. The question is, can it do it with 99% accuracy? Because if it does it 80%, then 1 in 5 times it getting it wrong, it's not usable for a consumer, right? So you either have to constrain the action space so that at every time you're asking your model to take an action, it's only got 5 options to pick from, and the consequences of it getting it wrong are low. Mm-hmm. Or you have to find a problem domain where 4 out of 5 accuracy is acceptable.
Right. And if you think about the architecture of building one of these agents, right, are there any differences to what we just talked about in terms of focusing on post-training, getting the UI out of the way, in terms of the architecture of building one of these kind of narrow autonomous action agents?
I mean, one thing for people to keep in mind, I think, is that there's a whole range of tools in the toolbox now, right? And so the art is in designing a router or a classifier that can take some given input. It's either contextual information, metadata, or of course the incoming query from the user, and redirect that to a model that is appropriate to that context, right? And that's important for inference management, inference budget management, because obviously you can redirect the query to smaller, cheaper models or higher quality models, or models that are specialized in a particular domain that have been fine-tuned for a particular area of expertise, or indeed have certain capabilities, like they might be good at retrieval. They can retrieve from some knowledge base or even from the open web, or they might trigger a model that has been fine-tuned for a voice response, because obviously the length and style of a voice response would be quite different to one that was producing paragraphs and paragraphs in a traditional sense. So the router is a critical part of the architecture.
So we can actually see from his response there that we're talking about the general trained language model and then a more specific trained agent, right? So the agent is trained on specialized technical knowledge to get the accuracy level. So like he said, with a large language model, if it gives you 5 different answers, it's okay if it's an arbitrary question, where there are multiple answers. But if it's a specific question that has a right or wrong, like a mathematical answer, obviously there's only one correct answer. 2 plus 2 is 4. But, early in AI, 2 plus 2 was 22. But anyway, they've sorted out that bug. But you see what I mean. So in certain areas, particularly medical areas, the accuracy has to be totally accurate. So the way they'll do that is not with a big general language model, but the general language model will refer to the smaller language model, the agent, who is a specialist in that field. That agent can then refer to other agents to do things. Now, the interesting part about this is once we start to fine-tune and get good responses, this is where we really start to work towards having what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence. So remember in my last video I was saying, there's lots of definitions, but one good definition is imagine an AGI is just someone that you work with, like a colleague, someone you can ask questions to do jobs, allocate them a task. So that's where it will really become very, very productive. Now, the way we communicate, the way we interact, like I said, voice, I believe, conversational voice and video will overtake written language eventually. At the moment, we're used to jumping on a keyboard and doing stuff because we can be more accurate. We can get an accurate result. But we're just trained, we're indoctrinated to do that. You go back 20 years ago, Google was just starting. People didn't go to search engines as much as they just do automatically now. So all this change just becomes ubiquitous in society. So the interesting challenge is once we've got agents that are specialists that can perform tasks and do actions, that's when it will get interesting. So this is an interview between Lex Friedman, who's a very, very well-known YouTuber, and Aravinda Srinivas, who is the CEO of Perplexity. So he explains things quite well. Just have a quick look at this.
This cake has a lot of cherries, by the way. It's not easy to make these systems controllable and well-behaved without the RHF step. By the way, there's this terminology for this. It's not very used in papers, but people talk about it as pre-train, post-train. And RHF and supervised fine-tuning are all in post-training phase. And the pre-training phase is the raw scaling on compute. And without good post-training, you're not going to have a good product. But at the same time, without good pre-training, there's not enough common sense to actually have the post-training have any effect. You can only teach a generally intelligent person a lot of skills. and that's where the pre-training is important. That's why like you make the model bigger, the same RLHF on the bigger model ends up like GPT-4 ends up making ChatGPT much better than 3.5. But that data, like, for this coding query, make sure the answer is formatted with these markdown and like syntax highlighting, tool use, and knows when to use what tools. You can decompose the query into pieces. These are all like stuff you do in the post-training phase, and that's what allows you to like build products that users can interact with, collect more data, create a flywheel, go and look at all the cases where it's failing, collect more human annotation on that. I think that's where like a lot more breakthroughs will be made.
On the post-train side.
Yeah.
Post-train plus. So
Yeah.
like not just the training part of post-train, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a bunch of other details around that also.
Yeah, and the RAG architecture, the retrieval augmented architecture, I think there's an interesting thought experiment here that we've been spending a lot of compute in the pre-training to acquire general common sense. But that seems brute force and inefficient. What you want is a system that can learn like an open book exam. If you've written exams in like in undergrad or grad school where people allowed you to like come with your notes to the exam versus no notes allowed. I think not the same set of people end up scoring number one on both.
You're saying like pre-train is no notes allowed.
Kind of, it memorizes everything. Like
Right.
you can ask the question, why do you need to memorize every single fact to be good at reasoning?
Yeah.
But somehow that seems like the more and more compute and data you throw at these models, they get better at reasoning. But is there a way to decouple reasoning from facts? And there are some interesting research directions here. Like Microsoft has been working on this phi models where they're training small language models. They call it SLMs, but they're only training it on tokens that are important for reasoning. And they're distilling the intelligence from GPT-4 on it to see how far you can get if you just take the tokens of GPT-4 on data sets that require you to reason, and you train the model only on that. You don't need to train on all of like regular internet pages. Just train it on like basic common sense stuff. But it's hard to know what tokens are needed for that. It's hard to know if there's an exhaustive set for that. But if we do manage to somehow get to a right data set mix that gives good reasoning skills for a small model, then that's like a breakthrough that disrupts the whole foundation model players, because you no longer need that giant of cluster for training. And if this small model, which has good level of common sense, can be applied iteratively, it bootstraps its own reasoning and doesn't necessarily come up with one output answer, but thinks for a while, bootstraps things for a while. I think that can be like truly transformational.
Yeah, so basically what I think he said, to sum it up, is that the models themselves, so they started off with this big model, they've dragged all the information they can get, and they've now, through the transformers, are getting answers, predictive text of what's going to happen next and everything else. They're now saying that can they isolate elements of this? So if they can isolate from a large model this common sense, and no one, I believe, in the history of the world has ever been able to tell anyone what common sense is, so it's a bit of a funny one, but let's say they've got this bundle called common sense. They, instead of needing the whole language model, they take that and they put it into a smaller language model. The smaller language model then can be trained on a specific topic or a specific domain, as they say, to actually make sure that it answers very accurately. So if you look at the advent now of AI, we have general stuff, and now we're starting to get down into drilling down to get it working better and be more accurate, and then be more based in domains, which takes me back to the agents that we're talking about, right? So this is my theory, all right? So my theory is that if we now are used to typing in stuff to a website, and we're used to actually using that interaction, and we're just now starting to use voice, so we're starting to give commands. The perfect example is if you take, say, Google and Siri and Alexa, all those other voice-trained machine learning models haven't got the fluidity, they haven't got the AI totally behind them. They were trained on machine learning, but it's a different way now that the large language model can reason and actually come up with a good conversational reply. So the shift will be that the interaction between the machine or the website or the information that you want will be through an agent. And then the next step is the agent can action things like book me a holiday in Paris, and it can go systematically step by step. So it's this step-by-step process they're trying to train the AIs to do successfully. Now, this opens a very interesting question because there will be a tipping point. And the tipping point will be when some very, very smart people realise that, okay, I am an AI agent and I'm an AI agent that can perform a task. And I assign that task to other AI agents to complete the task. So, human says to the AI agent, I want you to create me a product that will sell on the internet and make me a lot of money. Everyone will want that. So what happens is the agent has to then go and do the process. Now, the interesting part about this is if the agents have other agents doing all their work, there's no reason why they can't complete that progress fully autonomously. So you wake up in the morning and basically check how much money's in the bank. That's a simplistic explanation, but it's not as crazy as it seems. Because when you think of it, right, imagine we've talking about now super technology, super intelligence, and we'll talk about Ilya Sussberg's new company in a minute, but basically with super intelligence, there is no reason why, let's say it's a work colleague, AGI, right, is equivalent to me. It can do tasks, but it hasn't got the complexities to go off on its own and just create stuff. With super intelligence, it will. So it'll be competing with us. So when you think about it, if I have a business idea, I have to go through the whole process of actually doing it. Now, if I was a supermodel, I'm not a supermodel, if I was a super intelligent AI, then I know how I can go through the steps. For example, source the product, find the product, import the product, pay for the product, package the product, market the product, sell the product, collect the money. The whole system that it takes to run a business. Do the accounts, notify the tax office. Everything will be done automatically. Now, if the AI, the super AI, needs to raise its own money to be able to expand itself, it's going to have to think like a human and actually do these things. So there will be a time in the very, very not too distant future where there will be businesses totally automated, totally autonomously automated, because not only can the agent take the information, the agent can act on that information, and the agent can think steps ahead. So that's a very interesting thought. I don't think that's too far away. But touching on the idea of video, now there's a company called Synthesia. Now I've used HeyGen, which is quite good. Synthesia are one of the very early cloning companies, and you would have seen lots of videos of me in past cloning, and they are very, very good. And Synthesia are the top of the game at this, I think. But they're quite a big, legitimate service that's targeted the high end of town, is the best way I would explain it. So I might just have a quick look at this video. This is from the CEO of Synthesia, and he explains, interestingly, what I believe as well is the transition from text to video and spoken language as the new interface. So we'll have a look at that now.
But before we get into that, let's give you a little bit of a backstory as to why we believe this is so important. 580 years ago, the printing press was invented, and it marked the beginning of the age of communication dominated by text. However, over the past 100 years, we've seen the rise of radio, television, the internet, and social media. And it slowly shifted the way that we communicate and share information from text to video. In a few decades, we might look back and conclude that text really was just a transitory technology, the best means of communication we had for a couple of 100 years, but ultimately will end up being a relic of the past, like cave paintings or stone engravings. Today, we already live in a video-first world, and it's very clear that people prefer to watch and listen to their content, not read. To exemplify just how big this shift is, just over a decade ago, video made up around 30% of all internet traffic. Today, that number is over 82% and it's growing exponentially. People spend on average 3 billion hours per day on TikTok, 1 billion hours per day on YouTube, and over 200 million hours per day on Netflix. It's very clear that in our personal lives, most of us are already living in a video-first world. But when we look at our work lives, it's clear that we're not quite there yet. And if you think video is already used by modern companies everywhere, you're definitely right, but its use today is limited to major brand moments such as ads, keynotes, or in daily business interactions like video conferencing. Over the past few years, we've been working with thousands of leaders at some of the world's largest companies like Heineken, Zoom, and Xerox. And what they tell us is that they see a huge uplift in engagement and information retention when they make video for employee and customer communications. And that makes total sense. The Gens...
Okay. So yes, so I totally agree. He does run a video company, so he's totally biased, but that's okay, because at the end of the day, like the clones that I did, if you're trying to get your message across and you do a video and you're an effective communicator and you can capture that in a clone, you can then reproduce it. Also too, obviously there's lots of benefit by not having to go into a studio. Like for example, if I'm filming this and I make a mistake, I've got to go back and reshoot it. Mind you, I'm very lazy and I don't. I just continue to go on. But that's the same point. If I've left this video, I've gone, then I needed to say something else, then I've got to come back and set everything up. Basically, with clones, I can just take the text and put the text in and reproduce the video. And particularly for things like that are rote learning, things over and over again, where you're presenting the same information all the time. So, I mean, I think it's a really interesting way to look at the example that he gave of, text one day could just be cave paintings. And we are just a moment in time, but the moment in time for the change is going like this. So it's very, very exciting. Now, again, there's some very good YouTubers out there. Matt Wolf I watch quite religiously. He actually covers the topics very, very well, and he's grown to be quite a well-known YouTuber. There's also a few others, but this guy's pretty good. And there's a quick analysis of what he does. We talked about Elias Suskerberg, who used to be with OpenAI, who went quiet and now has come up and started a new company. So I'll let Matt Wolf explain that one, because he does quite a good job at it.
Also, if you remember, Elias Suskerberg, one of the people who helped oust Sam Altman back in November of 2023, and then was unheard of for months and months and months, now went to X to say he's starting up a new company called SSI, or Safe Superintelligence Inc. If we take a look at the announcement tweet here, they claim that superintelligence is within reach. Building safe superintelligence is the most important technical problem of our time. So they've started SSI. They go on to say our singular focus means no distraction by management overhead or product cycles, and our business model means safety, security, and progress, all insulated from short-term commercial pressures. They're based in Palo Alto and Tel Aviv, and they're currently assembling a team to make these goals achievable. Now, I don't totally understand what's going on with SSI. It sounds to me like Ilya's going and essentially creating an OpenAI competitor to try to get to super intelligence. OpenAI's goal is to get to artificial general intelligence. Apparently this one is to get to super intelligence, but do it safely. And they're gonna have no customer facing products, at least not in the beginning. So I don't actually understand how they're gonna raise money. I guess there are gonna be some people out there that would be willing to invest just for the tech itself, just to see it advance. But I have a hard time finding major venture capitalist firms and things like that dumping a ton of money into a company that has no outward facing products. Like, they're just going to be dumping money into a product that has no revenue generation on the other side of it. I just don't understand how they're going to raise money. They obviously need to use a lot of compute to get to super intelligence, meaning they need data centers and huge GPU clusters. So they either need the money to go and buy all of that stuff, which I don't quite understand how they're going to raise on a business model that has no revenue generation, or they need to use cloud infrastructure that already exists. They need to use, Google's cloud or Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure or one of these other providers of cloud GPUs. And if they do that, how do they ensure that it's safe? Because now they're operating in somebody else's playground. I don't know. We still need to learn more about what is going on with Ilya's new company. I don't quite understand the business model behind it, but it will be interesting to follow along. And of course, I'll keep you in the loop as I learn more about it.
Okay, so the interesting part about that is exactly what I just said. If you're building a super intelligent computer, I'm sure the super intelligent computer can create its own funding model. Anyway, interesting thought. Okay, well, that's just some general explanations about, where I think the world of AI is going. I try to, basically present some idea of what's happening. The channel is called thailand.com.ai. I am here in Thailand, so what I basically want to do is I want to show you some of the latest news that's happening in Thailand when it comes to AI. So in yesterday's Bangkok Post, there was one article about AI where it said, most Thai jobs safe from AI. Less than 4% of positions threatened. A recent survey by Microsoft and LinkedIn found 74% of Thai executives would not hire candidates without AI skills. Okay, so artificial intelligence could have a muted impact on the Thai employment, with less than 4% of employees in the service sector at high risk of being replaced by the technology. However, a study by Microsoft and LinkedIn revealed 74% of Thai business leaders, compared to 66% globally, said that they would not hire candidates without AI skills. Now, this is a very interesting area because AI has been around for such a short period of time. Unless you're an old-fashioned computer programmer, a developer, and you can quickly transition across, the field is too diverse. And there's so much no-code that you can do. It's now not just about understanding how to code. Coding is a huge advantage, don't get me wrong. I don't believe that coding will be totally replaced by machines. It's certainly, I created an app the other day, which took me 2 days. It should have taken me 2 months. But it's very, very good for efficiency. It's very, very good for basically completing tasks and helping and assisting with tasks, which is what AI is very good at. But yeah, I find that interesting. The other article, which is interesting, is the let's pop back here for a second. Is basically this is an article in last week's Bangkok Post about a company like an architect design company, and they basically came out and said, look, we're starting to use AI in our process. And the thing that I find really fascinating as an old web designer and having to deal with copyright issues of constructing content and material, one of the parts of the article, they basically go on to say that, we're using AI within our daily practice. And it basically says this groundbreaking approach starts before the design process itself. Following initial client meetings, project details are entered into ChatGPT to generate ideas, which are then refined using Midjourney, which is a video editing, video creation program, specially designed program to create perspective images. The advantages of generative AI, instead of relying on Google searches and browsing on Pinterest, DWP, which is a company, produces its own references, images in ChatGPT, which you can do in DALL-E, and Midjourney, cutting down on research times. But what it does do, this makes the process exclusive to DWP. We are not copying others because we're generating original content. We don't need to use ChatGPT all the time, as creative designers on our A team already have extensive knowledge. But as a complementary part of the business, every business can use this. Now, an architect design business obviously can use the advantages of creating images on the fly that are completely copyright free, and that's where the big thing comes in with imaging. If you're trying to produce some sort of marketing material or some sort of document or some sort of outcome for your business, there's always been a problem with trying to tell the story with images. You have to maybe pay for stock footage or film your own stock footage. But now you can just create it with AI. So I think that's a big leap forward. Anyway, I shall probably leave it there for the time being. And thanks again for tuning in. I'll be back shortly again with some more up-to-date, interesting information on AI, both here in Thailand and any other bits of information I can find. Till then, okay. Till then, stay safe, and I shall see you in the next episode.
So hit that subscribe, don't be shy.